I love games. Well, I should add some additional clarification to that statement. Not all games, like a lot of those introductory icebreaker games at social events with a rote question that doesn't really lead anywhere and the answers are never brought up again. No, thank you. But something like narrative-driven video games? Yes, please. I love the way they put me in the shoes of the main character, of being the driving force of the world, of letting me experience a life or situation in a world apart from my own. So that begs the question, what was the game you last played that made you feel this way? Got an answer in mind? Good. Keep that answer in mind. Now for another question. Tell me something, do you remember what you were doing last year on this very day? A few months ago, I had a conversation with my brother where we discussed media like movies, anime, and games. Trying to convince him to play something with me is always hilariously difficult. I get the feeling he often sees it as a waste of time, though he didn't exactly say that to me. Games, I suppose, make him feel as if he were living a life that was not his own. Watching a movie or show still left enough separation. And while I don't agree with his sentiment, reflecting on how much gaming has influenced my life, he did say something that I've been pondering over the last few months. I mentioned I love gaming because it allows me to be a part of the story being told. Whether that's something like Malinois's descent into the underworld, battling the enemies of managed democracy, climbing a mountain in a desperate bid for rescue, assisting the town of Arden in its darkest hour, or leading a group of adventurers and their descendants against world-ending calamity. I, as a player, am a driving force and integral part of the story's progression, not to mention the byproduct of creation in original stories and jokes as well. I find so many stories within gaming and other media so thrilling. While he was and is intrigued by my line of thinking, he remarked that he'd rather be driving and thinking about the story that should be the most interesting of all. His own. And I would agree with that. The most interesting story of all should be our own, and we should be focusing on it rather than the myriad of distractions that we're bombarded with on a day-to-day basis. But how many of us would say so? To some degree, games are woven into the fabric of who I am. I have an enormous amount of nostalgia for an extensive amount of games I played in my youth, like Civilization 3, Age of Empires 2, Warcraft 3, both Reign of Chaos and Frozen Throne, Dynasty Warriors 3 and 4, Battlefront 2, and Emperor, Rise of the Middle Kingdom. I would assume from that assemblage of games I just listed, you could actually decipher more than a few things about my interests and about me. I imagine it's the same for some of you, though I know there are also more than a few of you who have no nostalgia for games and couldn't care less, and are here for those haiku videos of mine. My previous rationale for liking games isn't the only reason I like games, though it is intertwined with another primary reason that my friend keenly pointed out when I asked him the same question. Why do you like games? And I think to fully understand that reason, we need to talk a bit about transience. I could go on and on about a lot of the technological advancements that have made transience normal. Growing up, my oldest brother and a lot of his friends followed a similar trend. They would attend the local university, and thus stick around in the state after graduating. As a result, my oldest brother has never lived anywhere outside of my home state. But as time went on, and each subsequent class of kids graduated high school, they all started going farther and farther, until most went out of state, rarely to return for a holiday or two. That's what happened to the people I grew up with and experienced my childhood and collegiate years with. We're all over the United States now, and rarely meet in person. I wish that were different, given the importance of presence and being in person. But one medium that allows us to connect and spend time together even though we're physically very far away is gaming. I do think one of the most powerful relationship builders we have at our disposal is shared experience. Not only the ability to experience a story together, but our own, even if born out of a mundane or routine activity. There's this term that's been used in the gaming space, that being of emergent gameplay. This idea of taking a number of mechanics and a player, and the creation of new strategies, utilities, or stories beyond the original intent of the creators. Like how the meta is formed in competitive games because of how the top-ranked players have certain kits and have found wild synergies, and so pass that on. Another example might be some of the wild inventions people have created in games that exercise a healthy amount of creativity. Some of my favorite inside jokes and memories are from the times I spent exploring other worlds with my friends, like collecting crimson agates in Genshin Impact with my friend, even though I had already finished collecting them in my own world, participating in the Waldorf's Journey tournament, and keeping track of our wins and losses, a Baldur's Gate 3 campaign that spanned nearly 1.5 years, creating the real lore of Monty Mole in Mario Party, countless failures and successes in Helldivers 2, fighting bosses in MapleStory, scaling mountains until the first success ever in Peak, and the legend of characters and their exploits who continue to live on in Wildermyth. I could keep going, but you get the point. I have so many emotions intertwined with those memories spent in community with my friends. And so it goes years later. Those stories are recounted and reminisced upon. I was talking with a good friend of mine not too long ago, and we stumbled upon the question of interest. Why do you play games? His answer and explanation were unusual, but the more I think about his answer, the more I find it intriguing. He told me, I find I often play games to immerse myself in a world different than reality, to address other questions that my lived, experienced reality cannot. When I pushed him a little further to elaborate, he had quite a bit to say about several different themes and games he associated with them. First, he noted that games have often helped him to consider loss and encapsulated memory, yet they still remain present extensions of our lived realities across the scope of a universe or setting. One example he gave was Sid Meier's Civilization, which asks if anyone who runs a nation can truly understand the individuals within it, and on a broader perspective, has the player ponder much about human nature, our history, and the slow but ever-present element of time. Another one which I'd never even considered was Minecraft, which, in his words, he described as an extension of loneliness that none of us have outside of it, and brings to mind if inventiveness or creativity is the eternal balm of the soul that many in an era of overconsumption believe it is. Secondly, he felt strongly that games provide an opportunity to assess decisions big and small with reflective gaps, like choosing a dialogue tree or waiting on a loading screen when considering a decision that was just made and what is to come. Notably, how it is a very different relationship with our own decision-making, taking into consideration that life will almost never afford us the same courtesy. One game he pointed out to me was Outer Wilds, on the value of action, and humanity's constant wrestling with futility in the face of time. And finally, moral complexities within elements that would never come together in our universe, his example being Undertale. Though it may be a game, it asks some interesting questions such as what one is willing to give up, and what one can give up without inevitably making themselves unrecognizable and changing forever. Though I can't quite state my feelings in such eloquent terms, I too have felt the very things my friend described to me. Games generate an endless stream of questions. More often than not, if I really care about the plot of a game nowadays, I won't look up anything, particularly in a world of spoilers, and thus agonize mightily over decisions both big and small, knowing how they might impact the narrative of my character's story throughout. Did I make the right choice? Not only in the situation, but for the outcome I wished to see. Sometimes the things I thought didn't matter mattered an unbelievable amount, and sometimes the things I agonized over turned out to be fairly meaningless. And sometimes they matched my expectations. But regardless of the outcome, how these decisions shaped my opinion and the viewpoints of the characters and the world they're in. City builders often help me embark on that very same journey of creativity and that extension of loneliness that my friend referenced. Gazing upon something I've created in a game and my feelings of satisfaction surrounding it, like building a city slowly from humble beginnings. Sometimes it tells me I'm doing well through a score, sometimes I have a gut feeling I'm doing quite poorly in my role as the city planner. That maybe my planning and creativity means nothing in the face of a desire for more. or it feels as if I built this city to complete the objective, rather than a place where people would live. A city for no one. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to make a series of decisions that would affect the fate of entire nations or people groups outside of my little simulation. These experiences have helped me reflect immensely on my strengths, weaknesses, and the roles I fit best, even if they're purely fictional. I have thought much about the characters I am embodying, of legacy, legend, and myth, and how stories are sometimes disconnected from the actual reality of these figures. Or while I enjoy being the main protagonist in a lot of games, my personality is certainly more akin to that of a strong supporting character. Or how though I enjoy real-time strategy games, I most certainly wouldn't want to be a military officer at the head of an army, determining life and death on a razor's edge. Games let me ponder these questions and experiences. These questions and experiences of which my past and current life experiences cannot. I've been talking so far about games from a less tangible standpoint, but one of the most important reasons I love games is quite practical. There's this quote in Haikyuu that comes pretty late in the series, but is quite prevalent without being outwardly stated to that point. A character remarks that they're starting over again from level 1, then asks, "Doesn't it suck to be a beginner again?" And the reply? No matter how hard or easy the skill, getting good at something new is always fun. I'm certain both you and I have heard a lot of platitudes about failure throughout our lives. And while it is something that is unavoidable and will occur at some point or another, failure isn't a pleasant feeling. A lot of people will go their entire lives desperately trying to avoid failure and feel despair or extremely self-critical when it does happen. I would know. But I think that's why games are awesome when it comes to failure. Certainly in life, we don't have reset states or saves, we can't reload a choice once it's been made, and go down the timeline where we made a different decision. If anything, games provide the opportunity for a controlled environment where it's not only okay to fail, but encouraged. To the point, a particular genre that's intertwined with failure are games of the roguelike or roguelite. Games like Enter the Gungeon or Hades 1 and 2. In fact, they are built upon the idea of starting at level 1, and failing over, and over, and over, and over, and over again, and continuous improvement until victory. And to top it all off, they usually have some really interesting plot and setting that uses the repeated failures in a logical, in-universe manner. Like in Hades, Zagreus is the immortal prince of the underworld. His deaths, your failures, are merely a setback to his ultimate goal. Game Maker's Toolkit has a really great video on this subject discussing the pros and cons of this, which you can check out in the description below. However, for the purposes of this video, let me summarize the difference between the two. Roguelikes do not have persistent upgrades, meaning they almost exclusively reward players' skill. The only way to win is to improve. My ability to more accurately predict and react to a combination of enemies, or to utilize the kit I've been given, or in learning more information about a boss and their patterns. Combine all of those for a successful run, as it were. Roguelites have persistent upgrades that carry over from run to run, giving each and every attempt meaning. In roguelites, the slow accumulation of upgrades is perhaps analogous to watching the experience bar fill up. A few new abilities, upgrades, or ways to play that show tangible progress. Opponents fall quicker, or do less damage, for example. Hilariously enough, I feel socializing is, metaphorically speaking of course, like games of the rogue genre. Significantly more failures than successes, but a small accumulation of experience, as it were, every time. Learning which people I get along with, how to navigate certain social cues, unspoken subtext, dealing with people who are far different in values and demeanor. The list goes on and on. To quote one of my favorite quotes, "It's only those brave enough those bold enough to follow the difficult, demanding path of competition, who have the right to reap the wealth of experience and the memories it can bring. Today, you are the defeated. What will you be tomorrow? I think the feeling I enjoy the most is that sense of progression. It's an incredibly satisfying feeling to overcome a boss or obstacle that has just been stonewalling me for a lengthy amount of time, regardless of my form of progression, whether through incremental upgrades or my own skill. To overcome something with the sheer force of my willpower. To reap the wealth of experience and the memories it can bring. To get back up even when things don't end up going my way, and continually don't, in the hopes that one day they will, and I'll be ready to take on the next challenge. And that feeling is even stronger when it comes to challenges in my actual life, even if I'm scared. Games are a very tangible reminder of giving something another try, over and over and over again, until I finally succeed. I suppose this video and reflection was born of many discussions on how people spend their time, starting with my brother, and particularly to start a discussion that only scratches the surface about the value of games. But I would like to wrap this video up in a broader sense. Perhaps you're not into the grandiose, all-encompassing, head-scratching questions that might cause headaches for days if you think too hard. If there's nothing else you take away from this video, I want to make it clear. It's okay to enjoy something simply because it's fun. And games are fun. There doesn't really need to be a grandiose meaning to something or the things you like. I just find that I can't help thinking about why I enjoy and like the things I do. Stories get us out of our own heads. After all, sometimes our own personal stories feel far too heavy to constantly carry. They inspire us to dream bigger and do better, to help us reflect upon our own feelings and histories. Games that follow a story help us to play an integral role in the experience. I love the games I'm into because I feel strongly that they're born of creativity and imagination, which I've previously experienced to be one of the most integral parts of what it means to be human. At the same time, I don't think mere words and talking about the benefits of games are all that helpful, though they should be preserved for future posterity. I still to this day receive comments from my own mother about playing less games and wasting my time. Essays about games and their impact are a powerful rebuttal to that. I love stories experienced through games and media, but if the themes and ideas and experiences just remain within the stories themselves, well, they just die on the vine. If I don't take that sense of community and building memories into how I interact with other people in both new and existing relationships, if I don't take those existential experiences and questions and formulate them into learning more about myself, my strengths, weaknesses, likes, and dislikes, if I don't take that willpower and perseverance born from games into my life, into my own story, maybe games really are a distraction and waste of time. But I can confidently say, at least for myself, that games have helped me seek, pursue, and strive for more interesting stories. That outside of my life, and one of my own too. So I don't know about you, but I think, after finishing my most recent journey in Wildermyth, I think I'm going to go and keep writing my story. How about you?